My name is Nora, and I'm 28. It was Grandma Ruth's 90th birthday, the kind of milestone that drags every branch of a family tree into one room, even the branches that only show up for appearances. My mom rented a private dining hall. Chandeliers, white tablecloths, the whole performance. Around 40 people came. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen in years. Everyone dressed up and smiling for photos, like we were a normal, healthy family. I drove 3 hours to be there. I took 2 days off work, even though I was already behind on rent, because you don't skip your grandmother's 90th. Not when she's the one person who ever made you feel like you belonged. I ironed a dress, fixed my hair, and showed up telling myself I'd be calm, grateful, invisible if I had to be. Dinner went fine at first. Wine poured, stories told, and Grandma Ruth blew out candles on a cake that had way too many to count. She looked radiant, sharp eyes, warm laugh, and every time I caught her gaze, she gave me this small smile, like she could see straight through whatever I was pretending to be okay about. It was the kind of look that says, I know something you don't, and you're going to be fine. Then my mom, Denise, stood up and tapped her glass. She announced she had a special surprise, and the room immediately leaned in because people love anything that feels like status. She said that in honor of Grandma's 90th. It was the perfect time to divide the family jewelry. Pieces passed down for decades. I didn't even know most of them existed, which should have told me everything about where I ranked. Denise said she'd thought carefully about who should receive what. She turned to my sister. Kayla. First, Kayla got Grandma's diamond ring, the one I'd watched on Grandma's right hand my entire childhood. Kayla gasped, put her hand to her chest, and did the perfect little teary performance. Everyone clapped. Then my brother, Evan, got a gold pocket watch that had belonged to our great-grandfather. He held it like it was sacred. More applause, more warmth, more proof that this night was a stage and my mom was directing. I sat up straighter anyway, stupidly hopeful for 1 second. Not because I wanted jewelry, but because I wanted to not be the punchline for once. Denise turned to me with a smile that wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile that shows up right before someone tries to hurt you, but wants plausible deniability. She reached under the table and placed a small velvet box in front of me. The room went just slightly quieter, the way rooms do when people sense something sharp is coming but don't want to admit they're about to watch it. I opened the box. It was empty. Denise kept smiling. Then she said, clear as day, like she was delivering a joke at my expense. And for you, Nora, the empty box it all came in. A few people laughed nervously. Most people didn't laugh at all, but they also didn't stop her. Evan stared at his new watch. Kayla stared at her ring. I stared at the empty box and felt something colder than sadness. Recognition. That moment where you finally realize the thing you feared about how someone sees you has been true the whole time. I didn't cry. I don't know how I didn't, but I didn't. I just sat there with the empty velvet box like it was a label my mother had slapped on my forehead in front of 40 witnesses. Then, under the table, I felt a hand close around mine. Grandma Ruth. Her grip was firm, certain, not shaky, not apologetic, not confused. With her other hand, she pressed something small and folded into my palm. A note. She didn't look at me. She just squeezed once. Like a signal, hold on. I closed my fingers around it and kept it hidden. I didn't open it at the table because something in me knew this wasn't meant to be consumed in public. I kept it in my fist through dessert, through toasts, through the carefully forced small talk that fills the air after something quietly devastating happens and everyone pretends it didn't. Denise moved on like nothing happened. Kayla was already photographing her ring for social media. Evan was showing off the pocket watch to a cousin, and I sat there with an empty box in my bag and a folded note in my hand, waiting. When I finally excused myself to the restroom, I locked the door, leaned over the sink, and unfolded the paper. Grandma Ruth's handwriting was still precise, still hers even at 90. 7 words. The house on Elm is yours. I read it again, and again, like if I stared hard enough. the letters would turn into something else, something less impossible. The house on Elm Street was Grandma's house. The 2-story white house with the wide porch, where I spent nearly every summer of my childhood. The only place that ever felt like home. The place I assumed would be sold off. Divided up. Swallowed by family decisions I'd never get a vote in. And it was mine. My knees went weak. I sat on the edge of the counter and let the weight of it land. Not just the house. The message. The fact that while my mother was busy humiliating me with an empty box, my grandmother was quietly placing a key in my hand. When I came back to the table, Grandma Ruth was watching me. I looked at her, and she gave me the smallest nod. The kind that says, "Yes, it's real, and it's handled." I sat down. I finished the evening. I even smiled at the right times because I refused to give Denise the satisfaction of a public breakdown. But inside, something had changed. That empty box didn't define me anymore. It exposed her. If you were in my seat, would you confront your mom right there? Or stay quiet and wait? Comment, confront, or wait. 3 weeks later, I sat in a lawyer's office with Grandma Ruth beside me, looking more alive than most of the people who had laughed at that dinner. She'd updated her will 2 years earlier. Quietly, privately, without telling anyone. The house on Elm Street, along with a savings account I didn't know existed, was designated entirely to me. The lawyer explained why. Years ago, when I was 19 and my life was falling apart in ways I never told my family about, I wrote Grandma a letter. In it, I told her the truth. Her house was the only place that ever felt safe to me. The only place I felt wanted. Grandma had kept that letter. She had made a legal decision based on it. She never told me. She just waited for the right moment. And then she slipped a folded note into my hand under a white tablecloth. Denise found out within the week. The phone call was loud and long. She didn't ask if it was true. She screamed like she'd been robbed. Like the universe had committed a crime against her. She said I was manipulating Grandma. She said I was stealing from the family. She said I was ungrateful and selfish and cruel. All the usual words people use when they don't get what they expected to take. I let her finish. Then I said, calmly, that empty box turned out to be pretty full. And I hung up. I won't pretend I didn't grieve. There's a special kind of grief that comes from finally accepting that a parent can look at their own child and choose to make them feel small. Not once by accident, but as a pattern. That recognition doesn't come and go. It settles into you, and you have to learn to carry it without letting it rewrite what you believe about yourself. What Grandma Ruth did was more than give me a house. She gave me proof. Proof that someone who actually knew me, who watched me my whole life, saw something in me worth protecting, worth planning for, worth 7 careful words pressed quietly into my hand while everyone else watched an empty box and looked away. I moved into the house on Elm Street a few months later. I repainted the porch. I put plants in the windows. Some evenings I sit outside and I think about that dinner. My mother's smile. The room full of people who pretended not to see. And the steady grip of an old woman's hand under a white tablecloth. She knew exactly what she was doing. She always did. If this story made you feel seen, subscribe and turn on notifications. More real story times are coming.